Agatha Raisin and the Overfriendly Organist. A village choir, a vain organist, and a fundraiser meant to inspire goodwill instead ignite jealousy, secrets, and murder in the heart of Carsley. As Agatha Raisin sniffs out poison behind polite hymns, tell us where in the world you're listening from tonight, and subscribe so you never miss upcoming mysteries. Doris, if you breathe on that banner again, it will wilt, Agatha snapped, snatching the W.I. Hall's freshly ironed cloth from Doris Simpson's trembling hands. She didn't mean to sound sharp, but the Carsley Women's Institute had spent all afternoon dithering, and Agatha could feel her patience wearing thin. She had envisioned a triumphant joint hymns and home-baking fundraiser, a stroke of genius, she thought, with herself at the blazing centre of cultural leadership. Instead, it already looked like one of those earnest, faintly embarrassing village events that made London acquaintances pity her. "Sorry, Mrs. Raisin," Doris murmured, blinking like a startled spaniel. She tugged at her faded pinny and attempted a reassuring smile, which only made Agatha's irritation prickle harder. Before Agatha could issue fresh instructions, the W.I. Hall door swung open. In breezed Lionel Trent, the church's new organist, hair swept back in a style better suited to a minor television presenter than a village musician. He carried himself with the serene confidence of a man habitually adored by matrons. "My dear ladies," he declared, voice warm with theatrical charm. He kissed Doris on both cheeks, producing a squeak of surprise. He clasped Mrs. Bloxby's hand with gallant delicacy. Then he turned to Agatha. Mrs. Raisin, of course. The "of course" landed like a polite insult. Agatha stiffened. Naturally. Lionel's handshake was brief, curiously brief, almost dismissive, compared to the lingering fondness he bestowed on everyone else. Agatha was not accustomed to being overlooked, especially not by a man who played an oversized organ with unnecessary flourishes. Lionel strode to the front as if the evening belonged to him. "Shall we begin? I thought we'd start with a light warm-up, something accessible. Perhaps Be Thou My Vision." Agatha stepped forward. "I have a natural alto, you know, trained." She neglected to mention her training consisted of bellowing at various office parties during her PR days. "Splendid," Lionel said, smiling. "Let's hear your placement." The W.I. women exchanged eager glances, waiting like hens promised entertainment. Agatha lifted her chin and began a strong, confidently pitched note. She had not reached the end of the first line when Lionel gently raised a hand. "Mrs. Raisin," he said, with the soft firmness of a dentist soothing a panicked patient, "your tone is enthusiastic. Perhaps your considerable talents might shine even more in front-of-house flair rather than vocal execution." A ripple of giggles fluttered through the hall. Doris pressed a hand to her mouth. Mrs. Cartwright actually snorted. Agatha's eyes flared. "Front-of-house flair?" "You have such a commanding presence," Lionel added helpfully. It did not help. Mrs. Bloxby stepped close, voice low and soothing. "Agatha, dear, perhaps he only means—" "I know what he means," Agatha hissed. She had not endured countless diets, manicures, and hair appointments, only to be told she was better suited to arranging programs than singing them. As Lionel returned to his dramatic warm-ups, the kind involving rolling shoulders and fluttering fingers, Agatha retreated to the side, fuming. Her attention shifted when Marjorie Phelps, the church treasurer and self-appointed soprano-in-chief, swept into the hall. Marjorie had the brisk efficiency of a woman who organized charity events with military precision. She carried a sheaf of papers and wore an expression of permanent suspicion. "Lionel," she said coolly, "your last hymn selection was entirely unsuitable. Too many cadenzas. This is a village fundraiser, not a West End audition." Lionel smiled indulgently. Art should uplift Marjorie. "Not at the expense of the Organ Restoration Fund," Marjorie snapped. "We can't afford your dramatic tastes." The words Organ Restoration Fund caught Agatha's ear. She sidled closer, pretending to inspect a stack of hymn books. Marjorie thrust her papers at Lionel. "The programme must be approved, no improvisation, and do not drag out the final verse. I will not have the altos fainting from lack of breath." Lionel gave a gracious little bow. "As you wish." They glared at each other with polite hatred. Mrs. Bloxby sighed softly. "There has been tension," she admitted to Agatha. "Lionel is rather fond of being admired, and Marjorie prefers things traditional, and some parishioners say he is over-friendly. A little handsy, perhaps." Agatha sniffed. I hadn't noticed. She had noticed, attentively, and she resented bitterly that he had not tried to be over-friendly with her. The rehearsal descended into pettiness, altos arguing over seating, sopranos complaining about cold drafts, Lionel insisting on decorative flourishes Marjorie immediately vetoed. The air grew warm with irritation. Outside, twilight sharpened the edges of the village, but inside, tempers simmered. Agatha's pride remained tender, but her curiosity sharpened when a side door opened and Arthur Penfold, the quiet churchwarden, slipped in. Mild, grey-haired, and forgettable at first glance, Arthur had the habit of appearing precisely where one expected no one to be. He murmured something to Marjorie, who stiffened. Then Agatha watched as Marjorie, believing herself unseen, slid a small folded envelope from a folder on the committee table into her handbag. Interesting. Very interesting. Arthur noticed Agatha watching. His expression remained politely blank, perhaps too blank. Rehearsal ended in fractured clusters. Agatha left with Mrs. Blocksby, who attempted gentle reassurance. "You have a lovely voice in your own way, Agatha." "In my own way?" Mrs. Blocksby hesitated. "Distinctive." Agatha groaned. Even compliments felt like slaps tonight. Outside, the air cooled pleasantly, crisp but not sharp. Agatha drew a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. She would not be dismissed as a decorative PR relic. Lionel Trent had underestimated her. That was intolerable and irresistible. On the walk to her cottage, she replayed the evening's oddities. Lionel's oily charm, Marjorie's hostility, Arthur's watchful silence, and that folded envelope disappearing into Marjorie's handbag, a possible clue, or a red herring. Either way, intrigue had arrived in Carsley. When Agatha pushed open her cottage door, Hodge trotted forward, tail high, offering a soft, questioning meow. His presence warmed her immediately. She scooped him up, burying her face in his fur. "Well, darling," she muttered, "I've had a dreadful evening. Humiliated by an organist with theatrical hair." Hodge purred, unimpressed. Agatha set him down and removed her coat with a huff. Whatever storm was brewing around this ridiculous fundraiser, she intended not only to weather it, but to steer it. If there was drama to be had, and clearly there was, she would not allow Carsley to have it without her. She lit a single lamp, its glow settling into the cottage with gentle ease. Hodge leapt onto the armchair, circling once before settling. Agatha watched him, irritation ebbing. "Tomorrow," she said aloud, "I shall show Lionel Trent precisely who he's dealing with." Hodge stretched, blinked slowly, and flicked his tail, a domestic benediction at the end of the longest evening. And with that quiet motion, the room softened, and Agatha felt the faint spark of anticipation she always felt when trouble began to stir. She went to bed still simmering, while Carsley's gossip worked through the night without her. The next morning, Doris arrived to tidy up, and the talk in Carsley had already changed shape. "Hymn practice in living rooms," Agatha repeated, staring at Doris as if she had confessed to ballroom dancing with the vicar. "Don't be ridiculous." "I'm not, Mrs. Raisin," Doris said, having come round to tidy and make tea, dusting the bookshelf with slow, reverent strokes. "He's been popping round to several ladies' houses. Very dedicated, they say." Dedicated. The word hit Agatha like a slap. Lionel Trent had not so much as hinted he might need her assistance with hymns. Agatha folded her arms. "And what exactly does he do during these domestic visitations?" Doris brightened. "Well, he sits next to them on the sofa, very close, helps with breathing, puts a guiding hand on the shoulder." Agatha's jaw dropped. "A guiding hand?" "Only to support them," Doris added quickly, though her pink cheeks suggested she found the entire thing rather thrilling. "He says it helps their projection." "Projection," Agatha muttered darkly. "I'll project something at him." Her mood, sour on waking, plummeted further. She had planned to ignore Lionel today, to rise above last night's humiliation like a phoenix of dignity. But this news rekindled the sting. How dare he swan about Carsley, offering vocal enlightenment to everyone but her? Hodge, curled on the armchair, lifted his head with the weary disapproval of a cat who had witnessed too many of her crusades. Agatha jabbed a finger in the air. "Right. If he thinks he can charm half the parish while slighting me, he's mistaken." Doris paused her dusting. "Mistaken about what, Mrs. Raisin?" "About everything," Agatha snapped before softening slightly. Fetch my coat. We're going to rehearsal tonight. Doris blinked. We weren't invited. Doris, Agatha said, we do not wait for invitations. We create them. The rest of the day passed with Agatha stewing until dusk finally gave her the excuse she wanted. The church that evening smelled of polish and old stone, a combination Agatha always found faintly accusatory. Voices echoed off the high arches as choir members shuffled about, complaining about drafts and hymn choices. Marjorie Phelps stood at the front, spine rigid as a curtain rod, organising her sopranos with the militant crispness of a retired colonel. Altos, for heaven's sake, stop leaning on the pew rail. It's a choir, not a care home. Charming as always, Agatha muttered. Lionel sat at the organ loft, fingers fluttering over the keys like a man performing to an invisible audience. He played a scale with theatrical flourish, then winked at a soprano who simpered. Agatha glared. Honestly, you'd think he was conducting Tosca. Doris tugged her sleeve. Mrs. Raisin, maybe we should sit quietly. Nonsense, Agatha said, marching forward. We're contributing members of this community. Sort of. She took a seat where Lionel could easily see her. He didn't look down. Naturally. Arthur Penfold shuffled past with a stack of hymn numbers, slotting them into place with his usual quiet efficiency. Agatha noted again how he hovered near Marjorie, useful, invisible, and always within arm's reach of the paperwork. Yet Agatha noted how he hovered near Marjorie, fetching sheet music before she even asked. Marjorie launched into a tirade about vocal cues. And Lionel, for the last time, there will be no extra solos. That young woman you favour may be very nice, but she is not singing above the altos. Lionel sighed. Her tone is quite promising. It is not appropriate, Marjorie barked. This is a community event, not a romance. The room fell silent at the word romance. Agatha's eyebrows shot up. Lionel's special friend would be an excellent addition to her mental list of motives. Rehearsal resumed with reluctant enthusiasm. The sopranos wailed, the altos sagged. Lionel played too loudly. Marjorie hissed too sharply. Doris whispered apologies to no one in particular. Agatha observed everything, the petty quarrels, the nervous glances, the soft undercurrent of resentment that hummed beneath the music. After rehearsal, she drifted toward the vestry, ears sharpened for trouble. She didn't have to wait long. And I will not allow this to continue. Marjorie's voice, low and furious, sliced through the murmurs. Agatha stopped just beyond the vestry door. You've altered entries again, Marjorie hissed. Do you think no one notices? The organ fund is not your personal purse. Lionel's voice followed, perfectly smooth. Marjorie, my dear, bookkeeping is dull work. You likely misread something. I did not, she snapped. If this persists, I'll go straight to the diocesan accountant. Agatha held her breath. Lionel laughed, but there was tension beneath it. You exaggerate. Do I? Marjorie demanded. I know what you've been doing, and I won't protect you. There was a rustle, a drawer opening, a soft thud. Agatha risked a glance and glimpsed Marjorie shoving a ledger into the safe. A second ledger, not the one usually displayed during committee meetings. 2 ledgers, one hidden, one public. A clue, a proper, delicious clue. She darted back before she was seen. Doris bumped into her, nearly dropping her hymn book. Mrs. Raisin, I've been looking everywhere. You disappeared behind the cassocks. Agatha waved her off. Never mind that. We're leaving. They stepped into the crisp night, the church door closing with a heavy thump. Gossip enclosed them almost immediately. 2 sopranos murmured about a jealous husband who had been glaring at Lionel during rehearsals. A baritone whispered about a retired builder furious over the church roof contract Marjorie had handled. A nervous alto muttered about being pressured into volunteer duties she detested. Carsley's rumour mill churned with impressive efficiency. Agatha marched toward home, mind buzzing. Doris, do you realise what this means? I didn't know anything meant anything, Doris said anxiously. It means, Agatha said, that our dear organist is a walking motive factory. Everywhere he goes, he creates drama. Drama? Doris asked. Delicious drama. Doris frowned. Mrs. Bloxby says we shouldn't enjoy drama involving church finances. Mrs. Bloxby, Agatha said tartly, is a saint, but saints are not known for their investigative drive. She paused, glancing back at the dim church tower. Arthur emerged, locking up, moving quietly along the path with the unobtrusiveness of furniture. "Look at him," Agatha murmured. "Always nearby, always watching." "Oh, Arthur's harmless," Doris insisted. "He's just helpful." "A red herring," Agatha said with satisfaction. "Or possibly not." They reached Agatha's cottage. Hodge greeted them with a soft meow, tail held high. Agatha sank into her chair, stroking him absently. "Doris, Lionel's past must hold answers. Any man who collects admirers that quickly has left footprints somewhere." "Footprints," Doris echoed. "Scandals," Agatha clarified. "Preferably juicy ones." Doris brightened. "Perhaps Mr. Wong can help." Agatha smiled thinly. "Yes, Bill will know something. He always does." She stood, stretching. "Right now," she said, "I'll pay him a little visit. Quiet, discreet, dignified." Doris looked doubtful. "Do you ever visit quietly?" Agatha gave her a withering smile. "Always." Hodge leapt onto her lap, kneading her skirt with contented paws. His gentle weight grounded her thoughts, softening her irritation into a determined hum. "Don't worry, darling," she murmured, scratching his chin. "If Lionel Trent thinks he can waltz through Castley without scrutiny, he is sorely mistaken." Hodge purred in elegant agreement, a cosy benediction to end the evening. "Bill, I need information," Agatha announced the moment he picked up the phone. There was a long-suffering sigh. "Good morning to you too, Agatha." "I'm being perfectly polite," she said, pacing the kitchen as Hodge tracked her with judgmental eyes. "You know that organist, Lionel Trent. I require his background, scandals, dismissals, suspicious flower purchases, anything." "Agatha," Bill replied in the tone usually reserved for stubborn witnesses, "I will glance at his record. That's all." "A glance is useless," she snapped. "I need scrutiny." "You'll get a glance," Bill said firmly. "Goodbye." He hung up before she could protest further. Agatha glared at the receiver. "Rude man." Hodge flicked his tail, unimpressed. "Well, if the police won't help," she said, grabbing her coat, "I'll simply do it myself." She marched to the vicarage with the brisk determination of a woman convinced of her civic importance. Mrs. Bloxby opened the door with her usual warm serenity, which irritated Agatha in that particular way only calm people could. "Agatha, how lovely. Do come in." "I've come to offer assistance," Agatha declared. "Publicity for the fundraiser. Posters, flyers, strategic slogans." Mrs. Bloxby's smile softened. "That's very kind." "Not kind," Agatha corrected. "Necessary. One must rescue these events from amateurism." The vicarage sitting room glowed with homely comfort. Tea tray laid, knitted blanket across a chair, a faint lavender scent. Agatha eyed the teapot hopefully. Mrs. Bloxby poured. "Now," Agatha said briskly, "tell me everything about Lionel." Mrs. Bloxby folded her hands. "He's very pastoral. The congregation already feels supported." "Supported?" Agatha sniffed. "Fondled, more like." "Agatha," Mrs. Bloxby chided gently, "he's a little tactile, that's all." "A little tactile is how French dentists behave," Agatha replied. "He's a lech." Mrs. Bloxby tilted her head. "Unguarded, perhaps, but he means well." Agatha doubted that, but tea softened her irritation. "And the organ fund, people keep muttering." Mrs. Bloxby sighed. "A generous legacy was left some years ago. It was meant, and thank you for adjusting the lighting. You're indispensable." Arthur smiled modestly, looking as grey as the stone walls. Then Marjorie swept in, eyes blazing. "Lionel, you altered my hymns." Lionel sighed, as if exhausted by other people's smallness. "I merely updated them. Music evolves, Marjorie." "This is a parish choir, not a nightclub," she snapped. "Your modern rubbish is entirely unsuitable." "Rubbish? Bach would weep to hear you." "Bach," Marjorie retorted, "would chase you from the organ loft." Arthur stared at the floor. Doris hovered like a sparrow awaiting crumbs of scandal. Agatha watched them all, noting alliances, resentments, and furtive glances. This choir was a nest of grievances. As rehearsal began, voices rose thinly toward the rafters. Lionel drowned half their mistakes with decorative flourishes. Marjorie hissed corrections like a punctured kettle. Doris squeaked 2 beats behind everyone else. It was glorious. After rehearsal, people milled about collecting bags and fussing over notes. Agatha positioned herself near the vestry side door, and just in time. Someone slipped out, quiet as a shadow. She followed. The churchyard lay still, hedges catching the last crumbs of dusk. She scanned the path, heart thumping with the thrill of pursuit. No figure, just the faint rustle of wind through plants. This time the foxglove bed looked different. Someone had tried to tidy it. Stems pushed back upright, loose soil patted down. But Agatha saw what they'd missed. A torn corner of brown paper caught under a stone, smudged with damp earth. Someone hadn't just harvested here. Someone had come back to cover their tracks. Behind her, the church door creaked. She straightened quickly, brushing her knees. Doris peered out. "Mrs. Raisin, are you digging?" "Investigating," Agatha corrected. "Oh," Doris swallowed. "Should I worry?" "Always," Agatha said. She looked again at the disturbed plants, the quiet church, the flutter of choir gossip still drifting from inside. A threat note, a hidden ledger, a poisonous plant uprooted in the dusk. The mystery had grown teeth. Agatha squared her shoulders. "Come along, Doris. We have work to do." Doris hurried after her. "But what kind of work?" "The investigative kind." "Oh dear." "Oh yes," Agatha said, feeling the familiar spark of purpose flicker to life. "And believe me," Agatha said, "it's just getting worse." Back home, Hodge greeted her with a soft chirrup, brushing against her leg with warm insistence. Agatha stroked his head, the tension in her chest easing. "You won't believe the evening I've had." Hodge blinked slowly, unconcerned. Agatha placed the crumpled note on her table, smoothing its creases. The block letters glared back, ominous and exhilarating. "Someone is threatening our dear organist," she murmured. "How perfectly delicious." Hodge leapt onto the chair, circled once and settled with a satisfied sigh. Agatha watched him, lips curling into a determined smile. Mystery always sharpened her spirits. And tonight the kettle's soft hum and Hodge's steady breathing offered the cosiest backdrop for plotting. She tipped her head thoughtfully. "Tomorrow I begin in earnest." Hodge's tail twitched, a domestic seal of approval. The next evening, Carsley turned out in its best coats for what Roy insisted on calling the showcase. "Don't you dare crease that poster, Doris," Agatha snapped, watching her assistant flatten a corner with the anxious reverence of someone smoothing royal linen. "This event requires finesse." "It's only church hymns, Mrs. Raisin," Doris murmured, blinking nervously. "Only church hymns?" Agatha repeated, scandalized. "This is Carsley's cultural moment." And indeed, the village had produced a smug little glow, the kind it assumed whenever anything remotely artistic occurred. The afternoon felt plump with self-satisfaction as people drifted toward the church, clutching hymn books as if attending an opera gala. Agatha stood at the entrance, dressed in her smartest heels and a scarf artfully arranged to highlight her jawline. She had even applied a touch more mascara, determined to appear both pious and arrestingly glamorous. Then Roy arrived. "My darling Aggie," he cried, sweeping her into a scented cloud. "I've rebranded the event." "You what?" "I've renamed it the Cotswold Sacred Showcase. Rolls off the tongue." He flourished a stack of glossy posters he had designed on his office printer. The lettering glittered. Agatha groaned. "Roy, this is a fundraiser, not Eurovision." "Details," Roy said cheerfully, darting off to plaster posters onto any flat surface he could find. He left a trail of fascinated onlookers and one distinctly horrified Marjorie Phelps behind him. "Who authorized that?" Marjorie demanded, marching toward Agatha like a furious soprano. "Publicity," Agatha said airily. "You're welcome." Charles chose that moment to saunter in, hands in pockets, wind blowing through his untidy hair. "Thought I'd offer philanthropic support," he announced, "and witness the inevitable chaos." "You're late," Agatha sniffed. "That's part of my charm." Inside, the church filled steadily. Pious regulars in their best coats, husbands dragged from comfortable armchairs, tourists who had mistaken the event for historical reenactment. The air held a faint, comforting chill, scented with beeswax from freshly polished pews. Lionel sat at the organ like a king preparing for coronation. His fingers danced across the keys in pre-performance flourishes, each more showy than the last. His hair, slightly too long for Carsley respectability, bounced dramatically with each movement. Marjorie glared up at him, lips pursed in fury. She wore an expression that suggested she had personally written all church music since the Reformation. Agatha took her seat near the front with Charles on one side and Roy, already whispering critiques on the other. "Look at him," Roy muttered as Lionel practiced a run. "He's auditioning for something." "He's intolerable," Agatha whispered back, "but unfortunately interesting." Before the performance, a tray of refreshments circulated in the vestry: tea, sherry, and an inexplicable platter of cheese cubes. Agatha observed keenly as Marjorie selected a particular floral teacup and set it on a small table beside her music folder. Arthur Penfold hovered nearby, fretting over the urn. "The plug's loose again," he muttered, adjusting it with twitchy precision. "These things never behave." A harmless comment on the surface, yet Agatha's instincts twitched. Arthur was always hovering, always fussing, always precisely where no one paid much attention. The bell chimed. People rustled. The showcase began. The first hymn rose smoothly, the choir finding its voice like an old choir always did, clumsily at first, then with steady confidence. Lionel's accompaniment swooped and curled unnecessarily, but the congregation loved it. Agatha allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. She had, against odds, helped orchestrate something rather grand. Then Roy leaned in. "The altos are flat. This is tragic, Aggie." "Be quiet," she hissed. During the second hymn, Charles murmured, "Marjorie looks ready to murder Lionel with a hymn book." "She'd need two," Agatha said. "He's surprisingly spry." As the music continued, Agatha scanned faces, observing reactions. A jealous husband glowered at Lionel's winks. A retired builder shifted irritably whenever Marjorie sang. A nervous alto kept wiping her palms. Carsley was seething with motives, and Agatha savoured each one. The final anthem approached, a dramatic piece Lionel had chosen despite Marjorie's objections. She had protested for days, but he'd insisted the show needed grandeur. "This is going to end badly," Roy whispered gleefully. "Don't say that," Agatha muttered, though she suspected he was right. The choir rose, voices hovering on the cusp of harmony. Lionel thundered into the opening, fingers flying, body rocking with theatrical devotion. Marjorie shot him a murderous glance before lifting her chin to deliver a soaring descant. Then it happened. Her voice cracked, abruptly, violently. Marjorie clutched her chest, staggered, and collapsed in front of the choir. The music collapsed with her. A discordant crash of keys rang out as Lionel froze mid-phrase. Gasps rippled through the pews. "Good Lord," Charles breathed. Roy grabbed Agatha's arm. "Aggie, she's fallen!" Bill Wong, attending as a favour to his mother, pushed forward immediately, joining the vicar at Marjorie's side. Their hushed urgency sent a tremor through the congregation. Choir members huddled, hands to mouths, voices trembling with shock. Lionel looked genuinely shaken, pale beneath his charming veneer. Arthur stood rigid, white-faced, clutching the edge of a pew. Despite hurried attempts to revive her, Marjorie lay still, utterly still. Agatha's breath caught. A death at a church concert. Even for Carsley, that was rather dramatic. The vicar announced the concert's abrupt end. The congregation began filing out in uneasy clusters, murmuring theories before they reached the church doors. Roy dabbed his eyes. "It's awful, Aggie. Also horrifyingly fascinating." "Show some respect," she snapped, though she felt the same dark fascination curling in her stomach. As she stepped aside to allow two trembling sopranos past, her attention snagged on Arthur again. He stood apart now, staring at his hands as if they were somehow incriminating. Then something slipped from the folds of his jacket, a small brown paper packet. It fell soundlessly, landing near the leg of a pew. Arthur didn't notice. Agatha did. She nudged Charles. "Did you see that?" He glanced down. "Packet of what?" "Exactly what I intend to find out." Before she could retrieve it, a group of parishioners shuffled past, blocking her view. When they cleared, the packet was gone. Either someone had picked it up, or Arthur had. The whispering in the church thickened, rising like mist. She just collapsed. Lionel pushed her too hard. Heart must have been... No, did you see her face? Terrible business. Agatha absorbed every rumour, every hint, every tremor of fear. She stepped outside, breathing the evening air with deliberate calm. The faint chill pressed against her scarf. The final glow of sunset dipped behind the village roofs. Someone tugged her sleeve. It was Doris, looking as stricken as a lamb in a thunderstorm. Mrs. Raisin, she whispered. I didn't mean to stare, but when she fell, oh, it was dreadful. Do you think it was her heart? Agatha considered the question. Perhaps, but perhaps not. Doris gasped. Not murder? Agatha's lips tightened. One must never assume innocence in Castle. Charles gave a low chuckle. You enjoy this far too much. I do not enjoy death, Agatha sniffed. I enjoy accuracy. Bill approached, face drawn. Agatha, please don't start anything tonight. Bill, she said sweetly, I wouldn't dream of it. She dreamed of it constantly. Later, inside her warm cottage, with the church bells still echoing faintly in her mind, Agatha hung up her coat and let the quiet wrap around her. Hodge padded forward, pressing his head against her leg with gentle certainty. She lifted him into her arms and exhaled slowly. Someone died tonight, darling. Hodge blinked solemn approval, as if acknowledging the gravity of village life. Agatha set him down and lit a single lamp. Shadows settled softly across the room. Her thoughts flicked back to the fallen soprano, the trembling choir, the brown packet, Arthur's pallor, Lionel's shock. Somewhere between praise my soul and the final blessing, a murder might have been committed. Hodge leapt into his favourite chair, curling into a contented loaf. Agatha watched him, the room warm and still around her. We'll find out, you know, she murmured. We always do. Hodge's tail twitched once, a calm, domestic punctuation at the end of the longest, strangest concert Castle had seen in years. Terrible business, Mrs. Raisin. Simply terrible, Mr. Jessup declared, leaning far too close to the apples Agatha was attempting to inspect. Dropped stone dead, they say. She didn't drop, Agatha corrected. She fell, dramatically. And that Lionel, he continued, ignoring her nuance, always thought him a bit of a ladies' man. Agatha sniffed. You only say that now. Mr. Jessup flushed and retreated. Castle, Agatha noted, was enjoying itself far too much. The morning after Marjorie's collapse found the village conducting its favourite pastime. Moral speculation disguised as concern. Every shop, every doorstep, every pub corner throbbed with delighted horror. At the post office, Mrs. Mason lowered her voice to a whisper that could be heard in Oxfordshire. I heard her heart finally gave up, stress from all those accounts. Incompetence can be stressful, Agatha offered sweetly. Mrs. Mason ignored her. Of course, that organist upset her terribly, all that prancing. Agatha took the printed stamps she hadn't wanted and marched out before she said something unchristian. Next stop, the Red Lion. The snug already brimmed with gossip. A group of men hunched over their pints as if participating in a televised panel discussion. She sang too high, one declared, burst a valve. Poison, another insisted. Happens in crime dramas. Don't be daft, the first snorted. Agatha slid into a booth, enjoying the airtime she hadn't even requested. You were right there, Mrs. Raisin, said a barmaid, eyes gleaming. Did she look poisoned? How should I know? Agatha replied, though she was deeply gratified by the question. I'm not a coroner. Her mysterious tone lingered deliciously in the air. Doris bustled in, face flushed from walking quickly. Mrs. Raisin, everyone's talking about you. About me? Agatha asked, brightening. Well, about you being there when it happened, Doris clarified. Agatha's mood dimmed slightly but recovered quickly. Naturally. I'm central to village life. Before Doris could reply, Agatha's handbag rattled. She fished out her mobile, one of the old black bricks that always seemed embarrassed to be a mobile at all. Agatha, Bill said, voice tired already. Well, what have they found? You do realize these investigations take time? Oh, spare me. You called, so you have something. Bill exhaled. Fine. Preliminary notes indicate suspicious circumstances. Agatha felt a satisfying rush. Suspicious how? She had digitalis in her system. Foxglove, Agatha breathed. The disturbed churchyard bed flashed through her mind. Someone poisoned her tea. I didn't say that. You didn't need to. Agatha, do not go announcing conclusions to the entire village, she smiled. I would never. Bill paused. Someone helped her along. That's all I can say. The line went dead. Doris stared at her. Helped along? Who would help someone die? Help, Agatha repeated, savouring the euphemism. Such a polite word for murder. Doris squeaked. Murder? Quite possibly. By midday, Lionel had become the #1 suspect everywhere except among small children and Mrs. Bloxby. The village reinterpreted every gesture he had ever made. A lingering handshake was now proof of depravity. A polite compliment became sinister manipulation. Agatha listened to it all from her self-appointed throne at the shop entrance. "I said from the start that man was trouble," declared Mrs. Cartwright, who had said nothing of the sort. "And that hair," muttered another. "Too expressive." "Oh, indeed," Agatha said, pleased by her own early disdain. Yet Mrs. Bloxby's gentle voice interrupted her triumph. "We must be careful, Agatha. Lionel may be irresponsible, but that doesn't make him a killer." "It makes him suspicious," Agatha countered. "It makes him human," Mrs. Bloxby corrected calmly. "Humans can be murderers," Agatha reminded her. Mrs. Bloxby sighed. "So can bitter people." Agatha bristled. "Bitter? I'm not bitter." "I meant generally," Mrs. Bloxby said kindly, though her eyes twinkled. They walked toward the vicarage where a small gathering had formed. Teacups clinked. Voices murmured respectfully about Marjorie, though many sounded suspiciously cheerful. The vicar spoke softly about her dedication, her commitment, her tireless stewardship. Agatha noted that no one mentioned her personality. Arthur Penfold sat stiffly near the window, hands neatly clasped, eyes fixed on the floor as if reading invisible text. When someone muttered something unflattering about Lionel, Arthur spoke up in a quiet, earnest tone. "He is a good man. People misjudge him. He only wanted to bring enthusiasm to the choir." Agatha's eyebrows rose. Arthur defending Lionel? Interesting. Very interesting. Mrs. Bloxby watched Arthur with thoughtful sympathy. Agatha watched with sharpened suspicion. Before she could corner him, her mobile trilled its peculiar dying duck ringtone. She stepped outside. "Agatha!" Roy's scream nearly deafened her. "What?" "Is it true?" "Is what true?" "That your church concert had a death? Aggie, this is extraordinary for brand visibility." Agatha pinched the bridge of her nose. "Roy, this is not a PR opportunity. A woman died." "Yes, but tastefully, during a hymn." "Roy." "Fine, fine," he said dramatically. "Have it your way. But do the kitchen warm around her." "Someone in Carsley murdered Marjorie Phelps," she said quietly. "And I intend to know exactly who and why they thought they could get away with it." Outside, the village murmured with speculation. Inside, Hodge curled into a perfect loaf, anchoring her thoughts. Agatha placed the threat note beside her teacup and tapped it once with a decisive finger. "The game begins," she whispered. Hodge flicked his tail in calm agreement, a domestic benediction at the close of another very Carsley day. "You're taking me," Agatha declared, standing in Charles's doorway as if serving a warrant. "Today, now." Charles raised an eyebrow. "Good morning to you too. Taking you where?" "To Lionel's former parish, Morton-in-Marsh. Crucial investigative work." Charles leaned against the doorframe, looking unfairly handsome in a creased jumper. "Investigative work, or an excuse to escape village gossip before it cooks you alive?" "Both," Agatha said. "And you owe me. I endured your tedious charity auction last month." "That was for sick ponies," Charles protested. "And I was bored sick," she said. "Keys, now." 5 minutes later he was driving his convertible, hood reluctantly up, while Agatha sat beside him gripping a notebook like a general plotting conquest. "Why exactly are we doing this?" Charles asked as they turned onto the main road. "To support the bereaved," Agatha said primly. "Bereaved whom?" "Me," she replied. "Bereaved of answers." Charles laughed. "Ah, yes, the tragedy of insufficient gossip." Agatha sniffed and focused on her notes. Lionel Trent, charming, theatrical, over-friendly, possibly corrupt, definitely suspicious. The village wanted him guilty, which naturally made her question it. Suspicion was too easy. Murder rarely was. Morton-in-Marsh emerged in crisp light, a neat market town with an air of puritanical tidiness Carsley could never manage. Stone facades stood freshly scrubbed, shop windows gleamed, and even the pigeons seemed better behaved. "Ghastly," Agatha muttered. "So clean." "It's called civic pride," Charles said. "Try it some day." Lionel's former church sat tucked behind a square, modest but respectable, with a steeple that looked like it apologized for taking up space. Inside, the faint scent of furniture polish lingered. A brisk verger, red-cheeked and nosy, materialized instantly. "Help you?" "Yes," Agatha said, adopting her tragic but brave face. "We're here regarding Mr. Lionel Trent. We're from his current parish. Loss has occurred." Charles coughed. "Loss of morale," he supplied. "Terrible blow," Agatha pressed. The verger's eyes lit with curiosity. "You'd best sit down." Half an hour and 1 pint later, courtesy of Charles, who recognized the universal truth that gossip flowed better lubricated, the verger was in full confessional mode. "Lionel," he began, waving his glass, "was adored. Widows swooned. Younger women fluttered. He had that look." Agatha made a face. "Yes, that look. The one that suggests his mirror applauds." "Oh, exactly. But men hated him," the verger continued. "Thought he was too familiar with their wives. Whole business nearly caused a brawl over Christmas carols." "A what?" Agatha blinked. "Carols," the verger repeated solemnly. "People get territorial." He leaned in. "Mind you, there was trouble. Charity concert, big fuss. Treasurer resigned. Claimed Lionel meddled with accounting." Agatha's eyes sharpened. "Accounting disagreements?" "Oh, yes. Treasurer said money didn't tally. Lionel blamed clerical errors. No one proved anything." A pattern. Clearer now. Lionel moved, admiration followed, tempers flared, and accounts blurred. "And," the verger added with relish, "he's allergic to herbal teas. Can't touch them. Swells like a balloon." Her pulse ticked faster. Digitalis. Poison brewed in tea. Lionel wouldn't risk herbal anything if he were dosing cups. Someone else must have prepared Marjorie's. She scribbled furiously. "Anything else?" "Well, he played beautifully," the verger said. "Church never sounded the same after he left." Charles rose, stretching lazily. "Come along, Agatha. You've grilled the poor man enough." But Agatha wasn't finished. "One last question," she said sweetly. "Did he ever receive threats?" The verger frowned. "Threats? Plenty of mutters, but never a note or anything." Agatha pocketed her notebook. A death threat in Carsley, not here. Another thread woven closer to home. Outside, the sky held a pale brightness. Not sunshine exactly, but a clean, cold light that made distant fields glint. Agatha breathed deeply, satisfied in the way only fresh gossip could satisfy her. "You see," she said triumphantly, as Charles walked her to the car. "Evidence. Lionel has a history." "So do you," Charles said, opening her door. "You're not a murderer." "Speak for yourself," Agatha retorted. "I'd kill for a decent lunch." "Oh, then let's eat," he said, steering them toward a cozy pub with low beams and friendly smells. Over their meal, Agatha plotted. Lionel's reputation was a mess, but not quite murderous. Others in Carsley? Far more motive. She listed them as she ate, stabbing the air with her fork for emphasis. Back in Carsley, the atmosphere thrummed like a disturbed hive. People darted between shops with whispers trailing behind them. Doris spotted Agatha outside the bakery and rushed over. "Mrs. Raisin, I've been waiting everywhere for you." "Impossible," Agatha said. "I was in Morton." "Oh," Doris said, impressed. "Is that abroad?" Agatha ignored that. "What's the latest gossip?" Doris inhaled. Marjorie was arguing with Mr. Beach, the builder, just last week. Apparently she tried to force him to cut his invoice for the hall roof repairs. Told him he overcharged. "Builders always overcharge," Agatha said. "But he said she was threatening to take money from the legacy fund." Agatha's eyebrows shot up. The legacy again. "And Miss Myrtle Frampton," Doris continued breathlessly. "She's furious. Says the legacy her sister left has been squandered. She blamed Lionel and Marjorie both." "Wonderful," Agatha said, scribbling names into her notebook. A jealous spinster, an angry builder, discontented parishioners. They were ripening nicely into suspects. "And," Doris finished triumphantly, "Arthur's been crying." "Arthur Penfold?" Agatha blinked. "Crying?" "Well," his eyes looked moist, Doris said. "Might have been the wind." Agatha watched the mild churchwarden in her mind. Quiet, competent, devoted to Marjorie's rules, yet eager to defend Lionel. Strange combination. Very strange. That evening, Charles joined her by the fire, lounging like a man bred for comfortable furniture. The flames cast warm flickers across her sitting room. "You've made a list," he observed. I always make a list, Agatha replied, flipping open her notebook. It helps the mind organize chaos. It helps your mind believe you're in charge, he countered. I am in charge. Hodge leapt onto Charles's lap before she could stop him. Charles smirked. See? Even your cat prefers me. Hodge has poor taste, Agatha snapped. Hodge purred offensively. Charles sipped his tea. So, what did today tell you? That people are greedy, Agatha said. Lionel draws chaos. Marjorie drew resentment. Money draws crime. Charles nodded. Follow the legacy, then. That's your thread. Agatha paused. You're right. Obviously, Charles said. She glared at him, but couldn't deny the truth. Everything spiraled back to that mysterious fund. Money missing, accounts muddled, legacies whispered about like family curses. And someone had wanted the concert stopped. Someone frightened enough, or angry enough, to threaten Lionel and kill Marjorie. She felt the investigation tightening. Her instincts prickled. Someone in Carsley understands those accounts, she murmured. Someone quiet, someone trusted. Arthur, Charles supplied. Maybe, Agatha said. He hovers. He also blushes when spoken to sharply. And people who blush, Agatha declared, are often hiding something delicious. Charles laughed. Dangerous logic. Effective logic, she corrected. Hodge stretched luxuriously across Charles's lap, stealing more of his attention. Agatha huffed loudly. Charles smirked. Jealous? Of you? Never, she lied. Of Hodge? Occasionally. Hodge blinked smugly. As flames crackled softly, Agatha turned her notebook's final page and wrote, Motive, money, access, ledger, knowledge, Arthur. She tapped her pen thoughtfully. It didn't fit perfectly, not yet, but money and resentment always left a trail, and she would follow it. The room settled into warm quiet. Charles lounged contentedly. Hodge purred. Agatha closed her notebook with crisp certainty. Tomorrow, she said, I dig deeper. Hodge lifted his head, stretching one paw toward her as if volunteering. Agatha sighed. Yes, darling, you can supervise. His tail curled, a soft domestic punctuation, the perfect ending note to an evening of schemes, suspicions, and steadily sharpening resolve. Don't hover, Doris. It makes you look guilty, Agatha snapped, adjusting a plate of scones with military precision. I'm not guilty of anything, Doris protested, though she instantly stopped hovering and instead wrung her hands over the teapot. Good. Then sit and look innocent. It'll confuse people. Today's mission was subtle psychological warfare disguised as hospitality. Agatha had decided the quickest way to unearth motive was to lure suspects into her lair with tea, cake, and the illusion of safety. She had invited an eclectic cast: Doris, Mrs. Bloxby, Arthur Penfold, Mr. Beach the builder, and Wendy Snell, the jittery alto who always seemed on the verge of tears. Her sitting room gleamed. Sunshine flickered theatrically through the windows, as if trying out lighting cues for a particularly gossipy play. Hodge supervised from the armchair, perched like a small, judgmental sphinx. The doorbell rang. Agatha inhaled, set her shoulders, and strode forward. The performance had begun. Arthur arrived first, hat clasped nervously, eyes darting as though afraid someone might accuse him of loitering incorrectly. Thank you for inviting me, Mrs. Raisin. I'm honoured. Don't be silly, Agatha said, ushering him in. You looked like you needed cake. Next came Mr. Beach, broad-shouldered, red-faced, and carrying the air of a man who believed the world undervalued him. He nodded curtly and stomped inside. Wendy Snell trailed in last, flinching when the door clicked shut. I hope I'm not intruding. You are, Agatha said, but that's the point. Sit. Once everyone had settled, Agatha adopted her most maternal expression, which looked slightly predatory. Now then. Tea? Doris poured obediently. Arthur accepted with a shy smile. Wendy's hands trembled so much Agatha feared she'd drop her cup. Mr. Beach took his tea as though it were an interrogation prop he intended to resist. Agatha smoothed her skirt, eyes sweeping the group. We're all distressed by recent events. I thought a quiet chat might help. Process things. Mr. Beach snorted. Chat? You mean gossip? Semantics, Agatha replied. Mrs. Blocksby, ever serene, accepted her tea and gave Agatha a warning glance that said, "Be kind." Agatha ignored it. "Mr. Beach, since you're bursting, what was your disagreement with Marjorie?" He huffed. "Nothing unusual. Woman wouldn't pay the proper rate for roof repairs, said she had connections at the diocese, tried to force me to cut my bill." Arthur looked shocked. Marjorie handled matters very professionally. "She handled them like a bully," Beach shot back, "always threatening someone." Wendy began to tremble again. Agatha saw opportunity. "Wendy, darling, why are you shaking like a leaf? Something on your conscience?" Wendy burst into tears. She said she'd tell everyone about my affair if I didn't volunteer for every event. It was years ago. I was foolish, but she had no right." Arthur looked stricken. Marjorie tried to bring out people's best qualities. "By threatening them?" Agatha asked pointedly. Arthur shifted uncomfortably. "She believed in standards." "Standards?" Beach barked. "She believed in control." Mrs. Blocksby intervened gently. "Let us remember she also worked tirelessly for the parish. She had flaws, but she meant well." Agatha pounced. "Flaws like guarding the legacy funds with more secrecy than MI5. Arthur coloured. "She handled the paperwork because she was good at it." "She didn't like anyone checking the figures," Mrs. Blocksby added kindly. "I once offered to help. She declined firmly." Beach folded his arms. Funds weren't adding up. Everyone knew it. Arthur flinched. It was complicated, which Agatha noted was a phrase used only when numbers didn't behave. She leaned back, appearing idle. "Interesting. Anything else complicated, Arthur? Anything you noticed the night of the concert?" Arthur blinked. "No. Why?" Before he could formulate a safer answer, Doris chimed in brightly. "I saw you in the vestry fiddling with the cups before the tea came out." Silence fell like a dropped hymn book. Arthur went pink. I was tidying. The tray was crooked." Agatha murmured. "Crooked trays can be lethal." Arthur stammered. "I didn't serve the tea. Lionel handed it round." "Which was unusual," Mrs. Blocksby noted gently. "Marjorie normally insisted on that duty." Agatha's eyes narrowed. Why wasn't she serving it then? No answer came, only the faint sound of Hodge's tail tapping rhythmically, as though marking beats of suspicion. Wendy sniffed. Everyone hated her at the end. "Not everyone," Arthur said. "Name one person besides you," Beach grunted. Arthur opened his mouth, closed it, and stared at his lap. Agatha watched him keenly. A man mild enough to be overlooked, sensitive enough to be intimidated, yet loyal beyond logic. Loyalty and fear often walked hand in hand. Useful motives, both. She shifted tack. "So, Mr. Beach, did Marjorie threaten to expose anything of yours?" "Just my livelihood," he muttered. "She said if I didn't cut the bill, she'd call in the legacy. Told me builders always padded invoices. I don't." "She made similar remarks elsewhere," Mrs. Blocksby added. "The legacy troubled her." "Because she oversaw it," Agatha said, "and someone else wanted control." Again Arthur flinched. She switched to Wendy. "And your affair. Did Marjorie name the man?" Wendy shook her head violently. "He's married now. She promised she'd ruin us both." Agatha filed away the detail. Blackmail, financial pressure, manipulation. Marjorie's enemies multiplied by the minute. But only one had been near those cups. "Cake?" Agatha offered sweetly. It often loosens tongues. Beach took a large slice as though fueled by indignation. Wendy nibbled at hers daintily. Arthur declined. Doris had two. Agatha steered the conversation with surgical precision, questions disguised as sympathy, prods masked as curiosity. Bits of resentment surfaced like bubbles in boiling water. By the time the tea was finished, Arthur looked exhausted, Wendy tear-stained, Beach furious, and Mrs. Blocksby quietly contemplative. Agatha stood. "Thank you all for coming. I feel we've made emotional progress." Beach muttered something unprintable. Wendy apologized to the air. Arthur looked ready to flee. When the room finally emptied, Mrs. Blocksby lingered. "Agatha, be careful. You stirred strong feelings." "Better out than in," Agatha said. "Hatred this deep doesn't die with the person who caused it," Mrs. Blocksby said softly. "It finds new direction." Agatha frowned. "Meaning?" Someone in Carsley is relieved Marjorie is gone, Mrs. Bloxby said. That relief can be dangerous. Agatha watched her leave, unsettled. The WI meeting that evening threatened to combust before Agatha even sat down. Half the women wore mourning expressions. The other half had the gleeful look of people preparing to rewrite history. "We should erect a plaque," announced Mrs. Cartwright. "We should not," snapped Mrs. Mason. "We should move on." "It's respectful," Cartwright insisted. "It's hypocritical," Mason countered. Agatha folded her arms, enjoying the show. Doris attempted diplomacy. "Perhaps a small flower arrangement." "Flowers wilt," Mason sniffed, "like her temper." A ripple of laughter swept the hall. Agatha rose, assuming command. "Ladies, please, let us focus on the fundraiser in Marjorie's honour." "Which hymns should we use?" Cartwright demanded. "Nothing modern," Mason shouted. She hated modern rubbish. She was too controlling, someone else muttered. Too critical. Too secretive. Too everything. The meeting dissolved into character assassination with remarkable speed. Agatha contributed the occasional nudge, which accelerated matters beautifully. At last, Mrs. Bloxby stood, calm as a candle flame. "Ladies, whatever we choose, let us not forget she believed she was doing her best." Silence settled, embarrassed and brief. Agatha felt a faint tug of guilt but buried it under practicality. When she reached home, Hodge greeted her with a chirrup that sounded suspiciously judgmental. She sat, letting him climb into her lap at last. "Someone enjoyed today a little too much," she murmured, stroking him. She meant herself, but the thought lingered. Someone had enjoyed Marjorie's death even more. "And they were—" "Coffee?" Lionel offered nervously. "Instant, safe, no herbs." Agatha sat, crossing her legs with the confident snap of someone about to unmask a villain. "Why was only Marjorie's cup poisoned? And who arranged the cups before you poured?" Lionel gulped. "Arthur did. He sorted them. I merely distributed." Agatha's eyes narrowed. "And no one saw this?" "Everyone saw everything," Lionel moaned, "except the bits that matter." His hands fluttered like startled sparrows. "Mrs. Raisin, I swear I never touch plants or herbs. I don't even go near the churchyard. I swell terribly." "I know," Agatha said. Lionel blinked. "You know? You have the look of a man whose immune system objects to botany." He slumped into a chair. "Marjorie was after me, kept accusing me of taking liberties with the organ fund." "Were you?" "Of course not. I only suggested reallocating some money for music stands. She said my sums were creative. I said hers were prehistoric. She threatened to report me for mismanagement." Agatha leaned forward. "Did she threaten anyone else?" Lionel hesitated. "Well, several choir members feared her temper, and Arthur was terrified of disappointing her." "Arthur?" Lionel nodded. "She depended on him. He adored her, I think, but he also dreaded her." A complicated relationship. Agatha filed it away. She stood. "I'm going." "So soon?" Lionel asked, both hopeful and wounded. "Yes, and don't leave town, or Evesham, or your sofa." As she reached the door, something on the hall table caught her eye. A gardening handbook. Thin spine, creased cover, multiple bookmarks. Agatha pointed. "Yours?" Lionel recoiled. "Good heavens, no. I don't garden. I barely water houseplants." A voice called from behind her. His landlord, a wiry man with a grim moustache, appeared. "That book's Arthur's. He was fixing Lionel's sticking window last week. Left it here." Agatha's pulse stirred. "Arthur reads about gardening?" "Obsessively," the landlord said. "Knows every poisonous plant." Agatha smiled with razor sharpness. "Does he now?" Back in Carsley, the village had become oddly still. Not peaceful, just holding its breath. Even the usual dog walkers moved with the solemnity of people reenacting a funeral procession. At home, Agatha changed coats and marched to the Red Lion. She needed noise, warmth, and gossip density. The moment she stepped inside, conversation dropped. Heads turned, eyes widened. A ripple passed through the room, the wave effect local taverns specialized in whenever scandal entered. "Oh, good grief," Agatha muttered. "What now?" Mrs. Cartwright scurried over, breathless. "Agatha, they said you found a note." "I beg your pardon?" "A death threat." Agatha smoothed her expression. "Who told you that?" "A reliable source," Cartwright said proudly. "Doris." Agatha would deal with Doris later. "So?" Cartwright pressed. "Did you? Was it frightening? Did you scream?" "I seldom scream," Agatha said. "It encourages people." She slid onto a bar stool, and moments later she was surrounded by eager faces. Mr. Harris leaned in so close she could count his nasal hairs. "Tell us about the note," he whispered. Agatha sipped her lemonade with studied calm. "It exists." Gasps fluttered around her like startled birds. "But who sent it?" someone asked. "And why to Lionel? And why didn't you report it immediately?" Agatha raised a hand, enjoying the theatre. "Ladies, gentlemen, panic is unbecoming, but sometimes—" She paused dramatically. "Sometimes it is useful." The group leaned closer. "Someone in Carsley," Agatha said softly, "did not want that concert to happen. Someone planned carefully. Someone poisoned a single cup." "A single cup?" Mrs. Mason echoed. "Yes, Marjorie's." A rumble went through the room. "And someone set Lionel up," Agatha continued, "because they knew rumour would do the rest." The pub fell silent, the weight of suspicion thickening like steam over a stew. "Who?" a man asked. Agatha smiled lightly. "That depends on motives, and access, and who handled the cups." "But who did handle the cups?" Agatha allowed her smile to widen just enough to unsettle. "I'm exploring possibilities." She left them buzzing, letting the story gallop ahead of her. A panicked village revealed itself faster. Let fear do half the work. Outside, the cold air wrapped snugly around her like a cloak. She exhaled, thoughtful. Lionel frightened, Arthur hovering, gardening books, fiddled cups, creative accounts. Someone was weaving threads with care, not rage, not impulse, deliberation, and that someone might very well sit a few pews from her every Sunday, humming hymns with pious satisfaction. When Agatha reached home, Hodge greeted her with a slow blink, the feline equivalent of a stabilizing hand on the shoulder. She scooped him up, pressing her cheek to his fur. "Someone is framing Lionel, darling," she murmured. "And they're clever," Hodge purred. "Clever killers," Agatha sighed, "are so exhausting, but satisfying to catch." She set him down gently as the kettle sighed on the hob, filling the cottage with soft warmth, the perfect domestic counterpoint to a village tiptoeing around murder. "I know I'm missing something," Agatha muttered, pacing her kitchen like a general denied battle. Hodge watched from his chair, tail flicking with feline skepticism. She replayed the concert again, Marjorie's triumphant posture, Lionel's flourishes, Arthur fluttering about like a timid moth, the clink of cups, the hymns swelling. Somewhere in that jumble lay the clue tightening around her like a poorly fitted scarf. Hodge yawned pointedly. "Oh, hush," Agatha said. "You haven't solved any murders lately." Restlessness drove her to grab her coat and march to the church. She pushed open the heavy door, and a hollow hush greeted her. Without the chatter of parishioners or the shrill energy of choir rehearsals, the nave felt cavernous, the air cool and faintly damp. Her footsteps echoed as she made her way toward the vestry. The tea-urn sat on the table, dull, squat, innocent as a sleeping toad. She narrowed her eyes. "You little traitor." The cupboards yielded stacked cups, chipped saucers and tins of stale biscuits. And there, on the second shelf, she spotted it. The floral cup, Marjorie's cup. A faint stain lingered inside, a ghost of the deadly brew. Agatha held it like an archaeologist examining cursed relics. Above it on the shelf was a small cardboard box labelled "Foxglove Seeds, Educational Purposes." The handwriting was neat and careful, exactly like the labels Arthur always wrote for hymn numbers. "Educational, my foot," Agatha murmured. She turned at a sudden shuffle. Arthur Penfold stood in the doorway clutching hymn books, his mild eyes startled wide. "Oh, Mrs. Raisin, I didn't hear you come in." "No," Agatha said dryly, replacing the cup. "I imagine you were busy." Arthur swallowed. "The seeds, they're for a talk, on poisonous plants. Mrs. Bloxby asked me to prepare something educational." "Of course she did," Agatha said, "and naturally you stored them above the tea things. Very logical." Arthur flushed. "There's limited space. I meant no harm." Agatha watched him struggle with the hymn books. He always seemed slightly burdened, as though responsibility clung to him like damp wool. Rough few days? She asked lightly. He nodded. Everyone suspects Lionel. It seems unfair. Agatha tilted her head. You don't think he did it? Arthur hesitated. I don't know. But Marjorie made enemies. Even well, she could be difficult. Agatha stepped closer. Difficult enough to kill? His eyes widened in horror. No, never. But the panic in his voice told Agatha something else. Arthur feared the question because it had crossed his own mind. She let him escape without further interrogation. He scuttled away, hymn books hugged to his chest like a shield. Agatha turned back to the vestry. Seeds, a floral cup, a timid churchwarden. She filed everything neatly in her mind. Back outside, the village buzzed like an agitated beehive. News travelled faster in Castley than flew at a school fete. Bill had officially hauled Lionel in for questioning, and by lunchtime villagers were speaking of it as though Lionel had already been tried, sentenced and executed behind the co-op. At the WI hall, Agatha overheard Mrs. Mason telling Doris he confessed in the interrogation room. He did no such thing, Bill said sharply from behind them, making both women jump. But he looked tired of rumours, tired of the chorus of amateur sleuths, tired of the impossible task of maintaining order in a village where gossip outranked the 10 Commandments. Agatha intercepted him. So you dragged Lionel in? He's the obvious suspect, Bill said. He poured the tea. Yes, after Arthur sorted the cups. Bill frowned. Agatha, don't interrupt my brilliance, she snapped. Lionel's many things, but suicidal isn't one of them. He wouldn't handle foxglove. Bill sighed. Even if you're right, the village wants him guilty, and the more they push, the more likely he'll panic. Which helps the real killer, Agatha said. Bill rubbed his temples. Just don't stir things more than necessary. Agatha pretended not to hear that last part. That evening's choir practice resembled a medical waiting room. People sat stiffly, refusing to meet one another's eyes. Lionel's empty seat loomed like a gravestone. When Lionel finally arrived, released but frayed, several altos physically shifted away from him, as if poison were contagious by proximity. Agatha watched their faces carefully. The guilty avoided her gaze. The resentful glared. The merely dramatic sighed meaningfully. She slid into a pew beside Doris. Anyone acting unusually? Everyone's acting unusually, Doris whispered. True enough, but one person seemed to crumble more than the others. Arthur, adjusting hymn numbers with trembling hands, looked as if a breeze might knock him over. Agatha noted the hymn board. New numbers tonight? Oh no, Doris said. He's just replacing the ones that got smudged at the concert. He said someone tampered with them. Agatha froze. What? Smudged, he said, so he had to run back and forth to fix them just before the tea came out. A cold, bright thread clicked into place. Arthur had a reason to move between vestry and nave, multiple times, in the moments before the tea, with access to the cups, with foxglove seeds in his handwriting sitting above them. Convenient, very convenient. Doris, Agatha whispered, you're a genius. Doris blushed. Am I? Agatha hardly heard her. Her mind raced. Lionel had been the perfect distraction. Loud, dramatic, flirtatious. Meanwhile Arthur, mild and invisible, moved unnoticed. The village saw Lionel pouring tea, the flamboyant outsider. They never noticed Arthur preparing the stage. After practice, Charles strolled in as though attending a soiree rather than a grim communal sing-through. You look unnervingly triumphant, he observed. I've cracked it, Agatha whispered. You say that every week. This time I mean it. Arthur had access, a motive, knowledge of poisonous plants, and he adores Marjorie, yet feared her. That combination ferments beautifully. Charles tilted his head. If he adored her, why kill her? Agatha grimaced. I haven't solved everything yet. Probably money or humiliation. But he's hiding something. Charles tapped his chin. Then let's unsettle him. Agatha raised an eyebrow. How? Recreate the tea moment. Invite everyone who was involved. See who panics. Agatha smiled, a slow, delighted smile. A trap. A gentle trap, Charles said, with scones. Lovely. If we catch a murderer, does that mean I'm brilliant? You already think you are, he said. Well, Agatha replied, some burdens we must bear. By the time she returned home, her plan thrummed in her chest like a choir warming up. A thank-you gathering, perfectly innocent on the surface. thanking those who helped with the concert. Tea, cake, familiar cups, a subtle reenactment of the fatal moment. Arthur would be there, Lionel too, and others. She would watch hands, eyes, breaths. People gave themselves away when the past reappeared. She hung up her coat and entered the kitchen. Hodge stretched luxuriously on the table, blinking at her with lazy ownership. "Well, darling," Agatha said, lifting him gently, "we're setting a trap. A very polite, very English trap, with cream." Hodge responded with a soft, rumbling purr, settling against her shoulder as if to approve. Agatha stroked his head, her gaze sharpening with determination. "Someone played the wrong note at that concert," she murmured, "and I intend to make them repeat it, loudly." The kettle sighed into life behind her, filling the cosy cottage with warm promise, a small domestic counterpoint to the tightening web of suspicion outside. Agatha swept into the WI hall carrying a tray of cups, with the triumphant air of a woman arranging her own coronation. "Mind the tablecloth, Doris," she barked, though Doris was nowhere near it. The poor woman jumped anyway, clutching a plate of scones as if defending her life. By 6 o'clock the hall glowed with warm lamplight, the fog outside turning the windows into soft golden squares. It was precisely the theatrical atmosphere Agatha had wanted. If she was going to trap a murderer, she intended to do it with flair. Charles lounged against the far wall, hands in his pockets, giving her an approving once-over. "Very subtle, Agatha. Only a complete fool would fail to notice you've recreated the crime scene." "Good," she said crisply. "Then perhaps the complete fool I'm after will realize it too late." Hodge, smuggled in against every health regulation imaginable, sat regally on a folded blanket atop the piano bench, observing the preparations with patrician disdain. Agatha had insisted he would be comforting, though it was unclear for whom. Guests drifted in: Arthur, jacket crumpled, tie misplaced; Mrs. Bloxby with her gentle smile; Doris with her anxious fluttering; the choir alto looking as though she feared spontaneous interrogation, and even the disgruntled builder, who clearly hoped there might be free sandwiches. Agatha welcomed each of them with suspicious enthusiasm. Bill arrived last, naturally. He paused at the doorway, taking in the carefully arranged tea table, kettle, urn, cups, including the notorious floral one, and gave Agatha a look that mixed resignation with admiration. "I'm only here because I happened to be passing," he said. "Of course you were," Agatha replied, "and do stop blocking the entrance. You'll frighten my guests." The gathering settled. People perched on chairs in uncertain clumps, chatting about nothing of substance. Agatha moved among them with the practised glide of a society hostess, though the glint in her eyes suggested a wolf admiring potential prey. At last she turned to Arthur. "Would you be an angel," she said sweetly, "and pour the tea? You did such a marvellous job at the concert." For the barest flicker of a moment, Arthur froze. His face drained of colour, then flushed, then attempted a smile that looked painful. "Oh, well, I suppose, if you insist." "I do," said Agatha. He approached the table with the gait of a man heading for the gallows. His hand trembled as he reached for the kettle. Bill, leaning against the doorframe, narrowed his eyes. Agatha glided closer, her smile the picture of polite interest. "It's funny, isn't it? Foxglove seeds going missing from the churchyard, and those disturbed beds. People were saying it looked like someone had been digging in a hurry." Arthur's grip tightened around the kettle handle. "Of course," she continued lightly, "Marjorie was very particular about that legacy money, terribly particular. She refused to let anyone else look at the paperwork, didn't she? Quite forceful about it, I gather." The kettle spout clinked against a cup. "And then," Agatha said, her voice dropping just enough to hush the room, "there was the tea, the floral cup, the one only she drank from, and you were arranging the cups just beforehand. Doris saw you." Doris squeaked and dropped a scone. Arthur's hand jerked. Tea sloshed dangerously near the rim. Mrs. Bloxby murmured, "Perhaps we should all sit." But Arthur spoke first. "Stop it," he whispered, though whether to Agatha or himself was unclear. He set the kettle down with a thud. "Just stop." A silence fell across the hall, thick as the fog outside. Agatha folded her arms. "Then tell us." Arthur sagged into a chair, his shoulders collapsing like a punctured tent. "I didn't want to," he said. "I swear I didn't. But she left me no choice." Mrs. Bloxby placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Arthur," she said softly, "start at the beginning." He nodded miserably. The legacy. It was nearly gone. Marjorie handled the accounts herself, Arthur said miserably. Then she discovered the money wasn't where it should have been. That was why she kept a second ledger, the real one, and why she hid that envelope. It was proof she meant to blame me. Years of tiny errors, rounding mistakes, missing receipts. It made it look as though I'd mishandled it. Arthur swallowed. She said, burying her face briefly in his fur. The others began murmuring, drifting toward the exit in uncertain clusters. Mrs. Blocksby squeezed her arm. You did what needed to be done, Agatha. Hard truths require steady hands. Agatha straightened, chin tilting. Yes, well, someone had to drag the truth into the open, and Charles certainly wasn't doing it. Charles shrugged amiably. I was providing moral support, from a safe distance. She glared at him, but the edge had dulled. The hall felt strangely empty now, as though the confession had scraped something raw from its walls. Outside, the fog pressed close, muffling footsteps and swallowing voices. Agatha gathered the cups mechanically, noting how the floral one looked perfectly innocent, as all wicked things did. She set it aside for evidence collection and turned off the urn with a decisive click. As she locked the hall door behind her, Hodge nestled against her chest with a contented sigh. The village might sleep easier now, but Agatha knew human nature rarely allowed for true peace. Resentment lingered, lies waited, and somewhere in Castley, gossip was already rewriting the entire evening. Still, as she stepped into her cottage kitchen, the familiar sigh of the kettle warming on the hob and Hodge's soft stretch across the table brought a small, weary smile to her lips. Justice, she thought, was rarely tidy. But at least tonight the truth had been poured out, without poison.